Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking some time to continue our discussion in the City Line Leadership College regarding the 4 levels of leadership. Today, I want to talk to you about level 4. It's the very last level that we didn't get a chance to talk about in our time together on Monday, but wanted to make sure that you have this information available to you so you can begin to process through it, identify it in your own life, as you begin to read through some of the material this week and engage in some of the exercises. The hope is that this becomes even more clear. So, again, we're talking about 4 levels of leadership, this being level number 4, in which we've already talked about the idea of see it, of fix it, of lead it, and now we're going to talk about leave it. This idea of leave it leadership. We finished our time together last week talking about level 3, where we said we're now looking for people around us that also have leadership ability, leadership skills. And as we look to those people, our role is to train and equip and develop them to lead. We said that if we take some time and refocus on what the wins are, that we no longer are celebrating just basic things, but we're celebrating duplication, empowerment. How are we empowering others? That only increases our ability to lead. But the only way that you understand if your leadership is effective is for you to take the opportunity to leave it in the hands of other people, to see if your leadership could truly be lasting leadership. Meaning, does everything still happen as it should when you're not there? Does everything continue to move forward? Does anybody notice or recognize a difference that you, as the main leader or you, as the department head, is not there that day? Or does your team, do your direct reports, whoever it is that you're working with, do they know exactly what needs to be done and how they should implement it? And have they been empowered to actually carry that out? Our biblical parallel that we want to highlight in regards to understanding leave it leadership would be Jesus. Jesus was all about empowerment. Jesus, as we know, asked people to come and follow him. That was his invitation to everyone. In specifics, we know, and it's well documented, that there are 12 guys that followed Jesus, but there were also women that followed Jesus, and women who played significant roles, women who were leaders in the early church, business women. Women played integral roles. So this wasn't just something relegated for just men or those who had certain positions in society. Jesus looked at everyone for who they are, and he drew out the best in them, and he called them to lead well, to have a lasting impression on the world around them. Jesus says, come and follow me, that this idea of time spent with Jesus would have a direct impact in that person's life. And then now that person would be empowered to actually live out the ways of Jesus. Or another way you can say that is to begin to lead like Jesus. The role of a person who is exhibiting leave it leadership and is following the example set by Jesus, their role is to simply leave a legacy, to leave a legacy that your leadership should extend beyond you. That, for an example, if you spent 10 years at a company in a leadership role and you decided that it's time for you to move on, or maybe your organization or your company decided that it's time for you to move on. The reality is that hopefully, because of your leadership, because of your ability to lead, you leave a lasting legacy or imprint on that corporation or on that organization or in that particular church. That because you are willing to see what's best for the good of the whole, because you want what's best for everyone involved, you've had the ability to implement and lead in such a way that it impacts the entire organization. And because people have rallied around it, because people have embraced it, because uh, people have been empowered to do it, it leaves a lasting legacy wherever you are, far beyond you and your capacity to stay at any one place for any given amount of time. Um, so the question is how do we do that? If we're going to have leave it leadership, and if we're going to follow Jesus's example, how do we actually do this, or how do we leave it better? What are some of the key things that you and I can implement in being a leader that can leave it, can walk away from it, and it can still function without us? And this is what I would suggest. I would suggest first and foremost that we learn to systematize everything. To systematize everything. Many organizations, corporations, maybe even your household, you see that the standards sometimes get foggy, that there's not clarity in our values and what we're trying to do when we don't have systems in place that can actually keep us focused in any one given direction. The reality is that when we systematize everything, that we put a system in place, it gives us the infrastructure to not only handle the situations at hand, but it also allows us the opportunity to now scale operations. That when you systematize everything and everybody knows clearly what needs to be done, then you're able to pass it on to anyone. And now you exponentially expand the potential and the capacity within your organization. So, how do you systematize everything? You simply write it down. You got to write down what's most important. You got to put a system in place. For example, job descriptions are important in systemization. To hire someone to do a job, we have to be clear in what we're asking them to do. Their job description provides that. But as their job unfolds, they clearly want to know, what is the expectation? How is this supposed to be done? For example, if you were to walk into a Starbucks, you probably notice that with some variation, the majority of Starbucks seem to look the same. They have the same feel. Uh, their marketing is cohesive. If you order extra hot vanilla, non-fat, 3 Splenda, 2 honey latte, no matter what Starbucks, your hope is that wherever you order that drink at whatever Starbucks, is that it will always taste the same. The only way to ensure that it'll taste the same across all Starbucks is to systematize it, to write down the process. How do you actually make that particular drink? So that no matter who is working the coffee bar that day, no matter what barista might be in place, everybody has full clarity on what it takes to produce the quality product that that organization is known for. Not only writing it down, but how do we do what we do and trust God while we're at it? This, I think, applies to not just church and ministry, but I think this also applies just to our life. When you really kind of take into account, how do we do what we do? Let's write those things down. Let's analyze those things. Let's talk about those things. Let's discuss those things. But at the same time, let's not become so rigid and so focused that we squeeze God out of the picture. One of the things that we say all the time for us as a church and on our leadership teams here is that everything we do, we want to hold it open handed. That doesn't mean that we're not being strategic. It doesn't mean that we're not thinking it through. It doesn't mean that we have no plan. It just simply means that in all of our planning and in everything that we do, we're going to trust God while we're at it. And we're going to be attentive to where He's leading us and how He wants to move in and through us, and we'll adjust accordingly. But I believe that God blesses plans. I believe that God blesses organization. God's not a God of chaos, but God is a God of order. And so when you think of God being a God of order, why wouldn't He want us to take proactive steps to bring order to the organizations or to the departments or to whatever it is that He's placed in our hands to lead? One key rule of thumb to think about as you're systematizing things is this: it's not real without a system. You can say all you want, this is how we do it, this is how we do it, and this is how it's supposed to look, and this is how it's supposed to feel, and this is what it's supposed to be like. But it's not a real thing unless you have it written down. Why? Because systems provide stability. At the end of the day, systems provide stability. When all else fails, if we go back to the system, if we go back to the owner's manual, if we go back to the directions, if we go back to whatever it is that we have in our hand, it provides some kind of stability on the next right steps for moving forward. Um, Even if you've tried some things, even if you've experimented, even if you've kind of took the time to think outside the box, the reality is that a system will provide stability even when things start to kind of go awry. We can always refocus and we can go back and keep the main thing the main thing. And that's important because consistency is key to a good experience. Consistency is key to a good experience. Say you have a favorite restaurant that you go to, but every time you show up at the restaurant, depending on who's working, sometimes the restaurant is immaculately clean and orderly and the food tastes great. But then there are other times that you walk into the restaurant and maybe a different crew is working and it's not as clean. It's not doesn't have the same feel, and for whatever reason, your favorite dish just never seems to taste right on that particular night. We know that that would bother us. We know intuitively that as people, we actually expect consistency. I think as people, we actually like consistency. And so for us as leaders and leading people, knowing that our tendency is towards consistency, that the hope is that as we lead others towards keeping a consistent effort, a consistent commitment, a consistent focus, that also in result now provides an incredible experience no matter the time of day, no matter when it happens, no matter what day of the week, no matter who shows up. We can be consistent if we're willing to systematize everything. So if we're going to systematize everything, then that also gives us the capability to teach people to do what you do. Teach people to do what you do. One of the things when I was in corporate life, this is pre-ministry, but also I was in ministry at the same time. I worked full time, a day job, but I also worked full time for a church until fully transitioning to full time ministry. But one of the key rule of thumbs in my leadership position at the corporation that I worked for was to teach people to do what you do. And the way that they would say that is you need to work yourself out of a job. Work yourself out of a job. And the reality is that when you hear that and those words come across, it sounds scary. It sounds like, why would I ever want to work myself out of a job? You know what I mean? We fight so hard to keep our jobs and to prove ourselves on our jobs, especially as leaders. But the reality in leadership is if you are teaching people to do what you do and you are truly working yourself out of a job, then you know what that does? It actually makes your organization stronger and it makes you promotable. It makes you promotable. Even if you are a top level leader and you say, hey, I'm at the top, there is no promotion from here because I've made it to the top. It still extends your ability to think forward, to expand, to do more, because all of us have limited capacity. All of us are only going to be able to do so much with who we are and being these finite beings with a finite mind. The reality is when you can duplicate yourself, when you can teach people to do what you do and give them the freedom to actually do it, empower them to do it, it expands your leadership capabilities. It expands your organizational territory. You become stronger as an organization. It kind of reminds me of Jesus kind of speaking, and he's saying, yeah, I no longer call you servants, but I call you friends. It's kind of like Jesus built trust in people, and as people begin to trust in him, there was this incredible friendship that was there. They were in this together. They were doing it together. It wasn't like he was just managing people and the servants had no clue what the manager was doing, or those under him had no clue what was going on. It was that Jesus invited them in. He would begin to teach people to do what you do, and that's one of the things that I love about Jesus. Is Jesus? He took the time to hit every aspect of people's learning capabilities. And what I mean by that is that you and I, we can prefer learning in several different ways. Some of us are auditory. We can be told about things, we can listen in on things, and we can learn, we can pick those up very easy. However, there's those of us like myself who are very visual. We like to see it. We want it in front of us. We want to know what it looks like. We want to get a picture of it before we're able to feel like we have the confidence to be able to do it. But then there are those of us as well that we are kinesthetic, meaning we want to put our hands on it. You're the kind of person that, you bought a bike for your kid for Christmas and you didn't even look at the instruction manual. You just dove into the box, you got your tools, and you said, I'm going to figure this thing out. Well, the reality is that we only learn so much if it's strictly auditory. We learn a little bit more if we can see it visually. And yes, we can increase our understanding of things if we can touch it ourselves. But when you incorporate all three of those things together, we usually retain an upwards of 85 to 90% of our learning because we're incorporating all three: auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. As the disciples hung out with Jesus and as Jesus began to lead them well, Jesus wanting to empower them to the next steps, he would tell them about it, he would show them how it's done, and then he would commission them to actually do it. And those same things are still available to you and I today. As we engage in scripture as a leader, we can read about it. We can then in turn see it in others as others begin to live that out. And then Jesus commissions us to actually do the same things that he did. And then he encourages us and says that we would even do even greater things than he. So this is something that's fun and exciting as a leader. It shouldn't be something that is detrimental or insecure as a leader. If you find insecurity in teaching people to do what you do and empowering them to do it, then people aren't the problem. There's a problem going on inside of you. There's a problem that needs to be addressed in you. Maybe it's a confidence thing, it's a self-esteem thing, it's a fear thing. But I would encourage you, if that makes you uncomfortable to try to work yourself out of a job, right? Just even hearing that term, I would ask you just to take those things to God and see what God would want to do in your life as he continues to encourage you to be the very best that he's created you to be. But once you teach people to do what you do, your next step then is to leave for a while and just see what happens. You just got to leave for a while. You just got to let them do it. You just got to let them take it over. You got to let them make some mistakes. You've got to let people try some things. You got to let people manage it themselves. And usually what I talk about when I'm kind of heading in this direction is you need to be able to establish their leadership legs. You don't want to wipe their legs out from under them. You don't want to knock them off their leadership legs. You want to establish their leadership legs. You want to be able to give it over to them, leave it for a little while, see what happens, and then follow up. And as you follow up, you're able to talk about things that worked well, things that you observed that maybe didn't go so well, and then you continue to encourage them to lean in and better their own leadership. And the reality is that when you leave it for a while to see what happens, it's the only way to test true leadership. Again, do things happen like they're supposed to happen when you as the leader are not physically there and present? Will things go as you go or even get better? That's a big question for us to ask ourselves. Will things go right or as they should or even get better when I am not there, right? When I am not there. Something to think about as you're kind of processing through this idea of leave it leadership. When you look around who God has placed in your path, the people that you work with, I would ask this question: who on your team or in your surroundings has the leadership gift? Who have you identified has leadership gifts. You should not be afraid of them. You should not be insecure by them. You should want to empower them to lead alongside you. Okay? That takes effort, right? That takes probably some prayer. It takes you being the kind of person that says this: I'm going to commit to lead well. At the end of the day, I'm choosing to commit to lead well, because leadership is always more than just about me and what I want and what I think I need. Leadership is always about others. Leadership is always about the good of the whole. So at the end of the day, we have to commit to leading for life change, not for checking off boxes. We're not just accomplishing things. We don't just have just a to-do list. We're leading for life change, which means we must commit to helping others break out of their box and live into their leadership potential. That's what it means to lead well. That's what it means to be a leave it leader, that we must commit to helping others break out of their box and live into their leadership potential. As you think and as you process through these things a little bit, I would also encourage you just to spend some time in prayer. You've experienced a lot so far in the ways of leadership through these 4 leadership levels. You are going to watch some other videos in the coming weeks that talk about more characteristics of leadership, even some additional leadership levels that are going to contrast even the ones that I've spoke about. But I would just ask you to just kind of start by spending some time in prayer as you continue to seek God for the kind of leader that He has created you to be. Again, thank you so much. It's been great spending time with you. I hope this is helpful, and I can't wait to see you all again soon.